In this morning's crime report, a 28-year-old man faces charges for allegedly taking a teenager from her home in Tennessee to St. Charles Parish.
Christmas Day, 2024. A police siren blares like a banshee. Red and blue light from the cruiser parked out on the side of the highway smothers as it tries to pierce a thick forest. A man leads a pair of police officers through the forest. Inhumanly tall trees stretch out into the sky, twisting into gnarled masses. After only a minute of walking, they are in front of a tent. It's just out of earshot of the highway. Far enough that someone passing through on the highway would never notice the tent, yet close enough for someone to walk to it without too much issue. A few minutes later, the police exit the forest carrying a young girl. She returned home safely. In this video, we will go over the case details of the Alexander Matern kidnapping case and how a sick man stole away someone's daughter 2 days before Christmas. For privacy reasons, we do not know the name of the girl who was kidnapped. However, we still give her a name for the sake of staying succinct. Jane Doe, a name commonly given to the victims of crimes who don't want their names made public or cannot be identified. Jane was an avid player of online video games. She would go to school, come home, and finish her homework and chores. And once all of that is done, she would wind down with some games. Usually, online games are safe spaces, most of the time that is. Sometimes things slip the eyes of moderators and administrative teams. Unfortunately, Jane was one of these outliers. She had met another player in the game, and they would make fast friends. Christmas was on the horizon, and she wanted to hang out with her new pal at least once. So the two of them made plans to meet up. However, she had made a mistake. At her young age, she was too innocent to understand the dangers of the internet, and she was too inexperienced to know the rules or etiquette for safe and responsible internet use. Because of that, she could not have known the most important rule of the internet. Never meet or make contact with a stranger on the internet in person. They are fundamentally as dangerous as any other person, and by going out of your way to meet them, you allow them to do many illicit things if they so want to. 23rd December 2024, Jane was going to hang out with her new friend. Jane would go to the meeting point and wait patiently for her friend to come. She had sat down and waited for a few hours, expecting nothing bad to happen. Suddenly, before she could react, she was thrown into the back of a car and kidnapped into the middle of nowhere. The details of what followed the kidnapping are a blur in terms of investigative information. However, what we do know about what happened is that Jane was trapped in a small tent. Barely large enough for an adult man to fit inside, she was raped multiple times. Locked in that tent, her innocence was forcefully ripped from her, and she was taken from her family through manipulation. On the day that Jane had gone missing, her parents looked high and low for her. A shadow lingered around the house, and the Doe house was filled with an unexplainable silence, almost like someone had died. However, with their wits about them, they were able to remember that Jane liked to play computer games. So they looked through her favorite game and found that in her chat logs, she was talking to a man named Alexander Matern. They learned everything. They immediately reported Alexander for child abduction. They were in a race to find him and where he lived. And on Christmas Day, 2 days after Jane's disappearance, they were able to find where he had lived. Police apprehended Alexander Matern. He was enjoying Christmas with his family. There he was, a hypocrite who stole an innocent young girl's Christmas, with her parents partying it up with his own family. It must have been clear to Alexander that his time was up. Without much resistance, he fessed with his sins. He admitted to raping Jane, however he defended himself. Jane had not mentioned her age until he had finished assaulting her. However, common sense would rule this defense out. For one, not knowing someone's age doesn't count as a legally valid defense. 2. The bone structure and general appearance of 14-year-olds, preteens, and young teens are very distinct from that of a 17-year-old, the age of consent in Louisiana. Alexander was forced to direct the police to where Jane was being kept. After traveling nearly 100 miles away from the Matern home, they found that she was trapped in a tent with canned food and water. Thankfully, she had not suffered any physical harm. Locals made it clear that that neck of the woods would have been exceedingly unsafe for a child, let alone a child with multiple cans of food, the smell of which could attract coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, and many other dangerous animals. When questioned about why he chose to leave her here specifically, he said that there was no greater purpose. However, given the distance from his home, it's clear that he wanted to make the distance between him and the girl so that in case they found her, he wouldn't be anywhere close to the search perimeter. It may be focused on Alexander and his actions, and frankly, I understand why. He is a monster. However, we must remember who is more important in this case, otherwise we risk ignoring or underplaying the severity of the crime. What happened to this 14-year-old girl is a tragedy. I think it's important to frame how long she was likely for. Alexander had kept her in that tent for 2 whole days, meaning in all likelihood, he had abused her multiple times over that period. The effects of child sexual assault and CPTSD are under-discussed in these stories. Neighbors who had heard about what happened were shocked and disgusted, and the family has been greatly hurt by it. The sheriff who had been arrested on the case saw this and gave all parents a simple piece of advice. You should monitor what your kids are doing online, and you should try to play an active part in these kids' internet experience. Otherwise, it is more than possible for them to be taken advantage of by monsters.